Welcome to the Scorebook Live weekly football preview show. My name's Connor Morrissette. He's Lance Smith. We're out here at La Habra High School because they have one of the biggest games this week. We'll talk about their matchup against Calabasas coming up in a little bit. The way this program's going to work, we'll talk once a week about the 5 biggest Southern Section game and then the biggest game in the City Section. So Lance, 6 games on tap. We'll hit on. How are you doing? It's Tuesday afternoon right now. When you'll be watching this, it'll be Wednesday. How are you, though, on this Tuesday?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited. Last week we had an extremely exciting slate of games. It did not disappoint.
No, not at all.
We have another particularly exciting slate of games this week, both some good Southern Section and City Section action, and including a couple huge out-of-state games I'm particularly excited for.
Absolutely. So in the City Section, it was tough this week just to pick one. The game we went with Westchester at Banning, but Crenshaw and Garfield are going to battle this week, as well as Eagle Rock and Fairfax. So those will be 2 great games. But Westchester at Banning, those are the 2 teams who combined for the highest ranking in our Scorebook Live top 10. I believe Westchester's 6. I think Banning's 8 off the top of my head. So Julian Walker is the quarterback for Westchester, and he's not even the starter. He's been backing up Jillian Carter, who's out for a few more weeks with a knee injury, but he's been great, led them to a 3-0 start. They beat a really good St. Bernard's team who has Ja'Kai Torres, who's a great running back. That result surprised me a little bit. I thought it would be closer. Westchester beat him by a few scores. For Banning, it's been tough coming out of the gate. St. Paul was a tough team they lost to. They lost to Cathedral as well, and they got their first win against Dominguez last week. Jake Otto and Jacob Galloway are the 2 to know for Banning, quarterback and running back. So, Lance, it's just for seeding purposes. It's a fun kind of out-of-league game on the city.
Yeah, both teams, whoever wins, has a really good chance at making that top 8, which is big for playoff seeding. So it could have some big playoff ramifications, like you said.
Absolutely. Whoever wins that one should get an open division spot unless they really blow it in league, but I think a win would tell us a lot. So on to the Southern Section games. Like I said, we're at La Habra, but we'll talk about those games, or that game against Calabasas last. Let's start with the big game. It's on Fox Sports this week on the TV. Oaks Christian at Alemany. Last year, Lance, I was at the game at Oaks Christian, and oh my goodness, did Oaks Christian absolutely dominate Alemany. And we were both at Mission League Media Day this year, and the Alemany players and coaches talked about how this game is circled on their calendar. Yeah. Expectations. You've seen Alemany already this year.
I'm expecting, Oaks Christian has been a little unpredictable this year.
Absolutely.
They had the disappointing game that you were at versus Grace Brethren at home, and then after that I thought, I don't know, they might get hungry, because then last week they played Sierra Canyon, or they might, let it get to their head a little bit. They bounced back, had a solid win at home against a great Sierra Canyon team, so they're a little bit unpredictable. When we've seen Bishop Alemany, they're 3-0. They've won every single game by easily double digits, putting up big points in every game. The question is their defense. Is it good enough to hang with Oaks Christian? It might be, and it really kind of depends what kind of Oaks Christian team we get. So I'm expecting a fairly high-scoring game. I think if Oaks Christian plays their best game, they should have a strong edge, but this could absolutely go either way and come down to the wire.
Yeah, for Alemany, we know they're great on offense, and defensively they have some great recruits, but their schedule hasn't really allowed us to learn very much about them. And what I mean by that is they've played 2 out-of-state teams. They played a team from Utah and a team from Arizona, won handily. And then they played Dorsey, a team that's not even in the City Section top 10. Dorsey, a traditional powerhouse, but is miles away from where they were even just a decade ago. And that kind of leads me to think, okay, Miller Moss, we know he's great. He has all these offers, and he's a great quarterback. He's throwing to Kevin Green, who's a fantastic receiver. DJ Justice is another great receiver for them. Jashawn Todd has emerged. I'm excited to see how they perform against a good Oaks Christian team. For Oaks Christian, their leader on defense, Mr. Williams, really sadly, he's okay, but he'll miss the next few weeks. It could have been a lot worse. He had to get airlifted to a hospital during their last game against Sierra Canyon, so thoughts and prayers out to him. That was real sad, but he's out of the hospital, and it looks like he's doing better than maybe they thought. So they're without him, but if they can beat Sierra Canyon without him, even after losing to Grace Brethren, I think they got a good chance. I think the game's going to be real close, but if I had to make a pick, and I know we're not going to pick on this show, but I will. I'd go with Oaks. So the other game, Lance, or a few others, Narbonne at Orange Lutheran. It's at Orange Coast College, but I'm saying it's at Orange Lutheran because it's in the OC. Trinity League against the LA City team. On paper, not really a great matchup when you think about just where the City Section is in terms of the Trinity League, but Narbonne's the one team that can hang with a Trinity League opponent.
Absolutely. Narbonne, speaking of unpredictable teams this year, they're 2-1. They've easily taken care of business against 2 inferior foes. And then you and I were at the game at the Moore Park California Classic, where they got beat down by Lone Peak from Utah.
Yeah, by 20.
By 20, and the vibe was a little bit worse than the score. Like 41-21, that's a solid beating, but it's not a horrific blowout. If you were there, it felt like a blowout. They seemed demoralized. So we don't really know exactly what version of Narbonne we're going to get. They certainly have the talent to beat Orange Lutheran. Orange Lutheran is off to a pretty solid start as well, 2-1. So it's another game that could go both ways and come down to the wire.
Yeah, Oulu beat Edison 17-14 last week. 2 picks for Jack Barron in that game. I think Narbonne's going to win this one. And again, I'm making a pick again.
Yeah.
My fault. But they have a lot of talent. I think Orange Lutheran is down there with Santa Margarita, kind of the bottom of the Trinity League, which for them is probably disappointing, but not a terrible spot to be. They're still really good.
Yeah.
But I think Narbonne's at a different level. We saw them dominate St. Paul last week. Jack Brown rushed for over 200 yards, 3 scores. Jake Garcia is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. Jordan Banks on defense is great. There's a ton of talent on the Narbonne team, and I don't think we can say the same about Orange Lutheran.
Yeah,
so.
And Edison is one heck of a team. I saw them beat Carson a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
They're a good team. They have some good running backs. They have a good front line on both sides. 17-14, they're going to need to do a little bit better than that to hang with a team that's multiple steps above Edison and Narbonne.
2 other games before we get to our interview here at La Habra. First, we'll go with 2 out-of-state ones, but first it's St. John Bosco against Our Lady Good Counsel, a team from Maryland, and that game's on Friday at St. John Bosco, part of the Trinity League versus USA Classic that the Trinity League is doing. So just to give you a little primer on Our Lady Good Counsel, they have Chris Jenkins, who's a Michigan commit defensive end. They have a 3-star cornerback, Jason Scott. So he's pretty good too, but I just think I was looking at the 247 rankings. Those are their only 2 guys on the rankings, and looking at some other high school football team rankings, they're like in the 40s nationally, which is great, but you can't be in the 40s nationally and come into St. John Bosco's house and beat them. We know all about DJ Uiagalelei, who had such a great game last week at quarterback for Bosco. I think the Braves roll.
Yeah, I think the Braves roll. So far in their 2 games, Our Lady of Good Counsel has allowed 0 points and 7 points against 2 very good teams. Like you said, St. John Bosco, especially in California, that is a tall task even for one of the best teams on the East Coast in Good Counsel. So, we're making unofficial predictions, and so far
we'll go for a real ones Thursday.
Yeah, so far we're on the same page. John Bosco should roll them.
Yeah, I agree. St. John Bosco has a great opportunity to continue their undefeated season, and you mentioned Our Lady Good Counsel. Their defense is good. Their 2 top players are on defense, but I don't think that one's going to be all that close.
Yeah, only 26 combined points for them in their 2 games so far. They're going to need more than 26 against St. John Bosco to have a chance. So at number 2, we have what many across the country are calling the interstate game of the year. Arguably the 2 best teams in the country. Some would say the consensus 2 top teams in the country. Mater Dei versus St. Francis from Maryland.
Yeah, absolutely. Great game. Number 1 is Mater Dei, national polls all over the place. St. Francis is 2 in a lot of those polls. And just looking at some of the talent on St. Francis, I'm only mentioning 2 guys. It's like a Mater Dei from the East Coast. They have so many great players. Chris Bresswell is an Alabama commit defensive end. Jordan Tolles is an LSU commit at safety. They had a couple guys committed to Michigan. So they're not short on talent. And we know how great Bryce Young is, throwing 7 touchdowns last week against Centennial from Arizona. Cody Epps, the receiver at Mater Dei, had a coming-out party. We know Mater Dei is great. This reminds me, and I think it reminds most people, of last year's game against ING Academy. It was 2 of the best teams in the country going at it, fighting for that national supremacy. And Mater Dei ended up coming out on top right at the end. Bryce Young drove his team down the field, and I think he ran for the winning score in that one. And I expect this one to be close. I think this is going to be by far the biggest test Mater Dei has until they play St. John Bosco on October 25th. And I mean, again, I keep making these picks because I say I won't, but in my bold prediction in my column, I said St. Francis will win, just to be a contrarian person to pick against them. I don't think it's that crazy, the idea that St. Francis could beat them. Of course, Mater Dei has a great chance. They're the best team in the country, but this St. Francis team is really good, and they definitely have a shot.
Yeah, and part of what makes this game so exciting, like you said, not only is it a test for Bosco, but some would say St. Francis is the only team left in the country other than Mater Dei who's perhaps better than better than St. John Bosco. So this is probably the best test in the entire country that Mater Dei could get coming into Bosco. So if if they underwhelm, then suddenly I think that might make St. John Bosco, especially if they show out against good counsel, that could suddenly vault them in the rankings or vault them in the future predictions, both in league and in the playoffs against Mater Dei. So Mater Dei has a little bit more riding on this than just this game, although ultimately win or lose, that's not going to change how they play against St. John Bosco down the road.
Yeah, and just to your point, high school football, it's so tough to rank nationally. People in California, It's always who's better, California high school football or Texas high school football, and we really haven't seen any great California teams go up against Texas teams. That would be great to see at some point, because those are kind of the two big hubs. Florida, of course, should get a mention too with St. Thomas Aquinas and all the teams down there. But you play these national schedules like Mater Dei and St. John Bosco do. You do have an opportunity to win a national championship, even though it's not really real, and you just get named that. Because they do play so many of these teams, even if they miss out on a Texas team or a team from Florida, they have that opportunity. And I think the winner of this one is a great shot at being number one. Of course, Mater Dei would have to go on and take care of business against St. John Bosco, but they did last year in the playoffs after beating IMG, and they were number one, so could be 3 years in a row for them. All right, time for the last game we'll discuss on our Week 3 show. We're here with Ryan Cinelli, the La Habra quarterback, Penn commit. And you guys have a huge game, Ryan, coming up against Calabasas on the road. Both teams coming off of losses in that one. You guys played Mission Viejo last week, had a tough game there. They played Sarah, Calabasas did, and they lost in double overtime, 26-20. So two hungry teams. You've had a chance to look at them on film. What do they do well? What are you looking out for them on defense?
I think obviously they have a lot of athletes, first and foremost. They have a really good defensive end. They got a really good free safety and some good athletes in the secondary. So I think just we're going to have to be sharp, because if we're not, they're going to take advantage of it.
I saw them play Bakersfield a couple weeks ago defensively. I think a linebacker, or maybe it's the defensive end you're talking about, LaShawn Bell.
Yeah, he's the guy.
He tore it up. He's a threat, 6'3", 230, and extremely fast. So,
what's the game plan against him going to be like?
I think we'll have a couple guys helping out on him. I think it's just, what we do, we're going to try to get the ball out fast, get the ball in the hands of our playmakers, and I think if we do that, then we'll be okay.
And Ryan, you guys started the year with a huge win on the road against Upland, a D1 team. You guys are Division III. On paper, of course, the divisions don't really matter when you go up against a team of that stature. Playing against Justin Flo, one of the best players in the country, and walking away with a win against a really good team as well. Let's not sell that team short. That really set the tone for a La Habra regular season that has the chance to be special going into the postseason. What were your feelings walking off the field after that one?
I think we knew the type of preparation we had and the type of game plan we had going in, and just to see it come to fruition a little bit, seeing the hard work pay off to a certain extent. Obviously, it's a long season, but knowing the type of team they are and the type of players that they have, I think being able to go in there and get that win and being able to execute like we know we can, I think that really set the tone for this year.
What's the toughest thing about playing quarterback in Southern California, which is just filled with huge defensive lines, athletic linebackers, all of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's just, being able every single week, especially in our preseason, is just having to be ready to go. There's no weeks where you can kind of take a week off and kind of, we're going to kill this team this week. No, I mean, every team is athletes. Every team has Division I players. And I think just having to mentally prepare every single week for those type of teams, I think it really gets you ready for the next level.
One more question. What did facing Justin Flo, whose name kind of strikes fear in most offenses and offensive linemen and probably quarterbacks as well, and coming away with the win on that, how does that help mentally prepare you for the rest of the season?
I think just the way that he flies around the ball, it kind of makes you speed up your game, because you know that if it's not there, if you hold the ball too long, that he's going to be there. So I think just having that sense of urgency, I think really sets the tone. And when you're doing that the first game, then I think everything kind of falls into place the rest of the season.
And Ryan, we'll get you out of here with this. Every day in practice, you're going up against Clark Phillips, committed to Ohio State, as well as his brother Bryce, two great players in the secondary here for La Habra. How does that make you better, practicing against two really high-level guys?
I think just like I said, being sharp. I mean, they're obviously really high-level people, and you don't play anybody else than your own team. Like, I've been going up against them for 2 years now, and so it's been great every day. Like, Clark's going to bring his A game. He's going to bring the intensity. He's going to bring the trash talk every single time. So you better bring it too, otherwise you're going to have a rough day. So just being able to go up against him just makes you really hone your game in and be sharp.
He's Lance Smith. He's Ryan Cinelli, quarterback La Habra. I'm Connor Morrissette. This has been the Week 3 Scorebook Live football preview show. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.